How freaked out? I'm assuming your audience is. Oh, I'll let it go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our 7th episode of the Future of Learning. Happy Monday. Hope you've found a way to celebrate Halloween in some way. And for those in Toronto, yes, I cannot believe it snowed this morning. What is going on? We're delighted to have you back. And for those of you for whose first time this is joining our series, at Game Changer Sessions, we decided that we wanted to do a deep dive into the future of learning. And we wanted to bring thought leaders, experts, next-gen teachers, creators, investors, the whole ecosystem of bleeding edge people to help us understand where learning is headed. And we're doing this in collaboration with a new company that we are birthing at Game Changer, which is called Mastermind. And Mastermind is focused on the future of live learning experiences. We're building a platform to be able to help people learn in this post-pandemic world. And so it is with tremendous joy and a real honor that I bring you today's guest. Our guest today is Salim Ismail. Salim is somebody who is quite extraordinary. Salim was the founding executive director of Singularity University, which is a global learning and innovation community. And today, he is the founder and chairman of EXO. EXO works in OpenExO, which is a global transformation ecosystem with more than 6,700 coaches, investors, consultants, and innovation specialists, helping organizations, institutions, and people unlock abundance to change the world. I'm delighted to have Salim here. Salim, welcome.
Great to be here. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you. So Salim, the timing is absolutely perfect because last week, we were blown away by an organization called the Knowledge Society and a dear friend of mine, Naveed Nathu, who runs it. And what the Knowledge Society is about is actually helping young kids your son's age and my son's age, actually already start thinking about how they impact billions of people and use exponential technology. And what's so interesting is that our wonderful Game Changer community was like, where do I learn this stuff? How do I find out about exponential innovation for myself? Like the number of comments was, quite a few people. And I said, just you wait. On Monday, we have Salim Ismail. So it's perfect timing. And Salim, I'd love you to even explain the idea. Let's start there. What is an exponential organization? I know you just wrote a book a few years ago about this, and this is your work, your life's work is doing this. What do you mean when you say exponential organization?
Sure. So first of all, great to be here and love the topic, obviously, and very passionate about everything that you're working on. So lots to think about and discuss. When we built Singularity University, the aim was that we need future leaders to be aware and versed in exponential technologies, which are basically all doubling in their price performance like Moore's Law. And the uniqueness of today is that we have a dozen technologies now all doubling in their capability. And we've never seen that before. In the history of our world, maybe one technology is accelerating or another. And they're all accelerating, and where they intersect, you have huge product opportunities and multiplier opportunities. And I call it 20 Gutenberg moments. In the 15th century, the printing press fundamentally changed the world. And we actually call that now a Gutenberg moment for the basic impact and the fundamental shift it had in society. Well, solar energy totally changes the world. Blockchain completely changes the world. AI is changing the world. CRISPR, and we have, I think, 20 of those hitting us at the same time. And this means this disrupts every business model, every industry, every institution by which we run the world. And we noticed that over the last decade, the 2010s, a totally new breed of organization was being created where they've learned how to scale the organization structure as fast as we can scale technology. So TED uses community, Uber doesn't hire its own staff, Airbnb is leveraging other people's bedrooms, rather than owning their own. And you have a whole set of characteristics that we identified. And that's what we mean by an exponential organization. And they all have what we call an MTP, or a massive transformative purpose, that acts as their North Star and guiding light.
And so I love that. I love the idea that you are helping organizations really understand what it means to learn and to thrive in a world of exponential change and uncertainty. It's very aligned with what we do at Game Changer. And it's so exciting to hear that you've made so much progress, in working with organizations. And we'll get to that in a second. But let's hone in on that word, because I know that's a very important word to you. Your MTP, your massive transformative purpose. One, tell us what the hell does that mean? And then number two, you have a really interesting, massive transformative purpose at EXO. And I thought, it would be great for our audience to understand and learn what it means to have a massive transformative purpose.
Sure. So when we put the book together, we analyzed about 200 of the fastest growing companies in the world, and we found every single one of them had an umbrella tagline like Google, organize the world's information, or Uber, everybody's private driver, that acted as their guiding light. And you need that in periods of fast change, or when you want to evaluate projects. It's great for recruitment and inspires a community. And we found that every single one of these had one. And if you didn't have one, you couldn't grow in the same way, because people didn't understand inside who you were, what you were about, etc. Typically, it came from the founders. So we came up with the phrasing of a massive transformative purpose for these types of companies. And it could be cure cancer. It could be Elon Musk has 3 of them, right? Go to Mars, solve energy, solve transportation. Of course, he has to have 3. Ours is to transform civilization. Basically, we think that the world is going through the biggest inflection point in 500 years, certainly in our lifetimes, and we need to shepherd that new transformation into play. And the work and the tool set we've been working on since the book came out is, when you try anything disruptive in a legacy environment, the immune system attacks you. Right. And we get stuck in a political fight where bankers are fighting Bitcoin, taxis are fighting Uber, academics are fighting educational reform, and we can't get the new stuff in. And so we've been working on tool sets to break that immune system problem. And we're pretty excited. We think we've actually cracked it in a bunch of areas.
I absolutely love that. And I have a huge smile on my face because, I have veteran scars of, creating and running a corporate innovation arm in the early days. I helped build something called Tourstar Digital. Of a publishing company. And so I love the language of the immune system starts to attack you, not because people necessarily, have ill intention. It's actually just really hard for companies to disrupt themselves, right? It's like
it is, and I think the best analogy we found is like a Roman army marching along in a phalanx formation, right? If you come in from the side, it doesn't matter how nice you are, you're going to get speared, because they're all trained and chunking along in this way, and they're not geared. I think of companies today are geared for efficiency and for predictability. And yet now, as we come into a more volatile future, they need to be architected for adaptability, flexibility, agility, speed, and they're not set up that way. And that's the impedance mismatch in the world today. So you bear more scars than most. I have my own experiences from being the head of innovation at Yahoo, which, even though I was 8 years old, still had a massive immune system issue, which was what surprised me.
And it's funny because I bear scars, but I also bear success stories. Like, it is possible. And I think that's really important to understand too. And so I think for our audience today who's so interested in the future of learning, and just so you know, we have entrepreneurs, we have executives from, a bunch of organizations who are focusing on the innovation agenda. We have investors in the audience. We have, people who are teachers, people who really love learning. What I want to understand, and I think it's so interesting to sort of look at this angle, which is, how do organizations learn best? Now, if I'm right, I think you mentioned you've done 32 plus learning experiences for corporates to actually figure out how to think about exponential technologies. What have you learned about corporations learning? What do they need to do to actually learn best?
So I think there's only one path that we found that is viable for big companies, which is you leave the core organization doing what it's doing best, and you do incremental innovation at the core, feature innovation, better products and services, etc. When you want to do anything disruptive, you go to the edge and you spin it off into adjacent areas. Nestle spinning off Nespresso would be a good analog. Larry Page from Google came to me a few years ago and said, "Hey, your unit at Yahoo is really successful. Should I create an incubator at Google?" And I said, "No, you'll have this immune system response, but keep it, if you want to do something, keep it stealth, point it away from the mother ship activities, and keep it as separate as possible." And you see the result as Google X. The master of this technique is actually Apple. And their approach is very simple, which nobody's even noticed this is what they do. Yeah, they have a great design capability and a great technology supply chain. I argue that Apple's success is actually organizational, because they will form a small team that's very disruptive, take that team to the edge of the organization, keep them totally secret and stealth, and say, go disrupt another industry, right? Nobody does this. And so they have a portfolio of teams looking at different industries. When they think something's ready for disruption, they enter it in and with a new product. So there's literally no limit to their market cap. And so that's the model I think big companies will have to follow in order to be successful in the future. And I have not found another workable approach. Coca-Cola a few years ago took a very courageous stance and said, we're going to do transparent innovation, disruptive innovation in the mothership. And I totally applaud the effort, but it totally failed.
Right. And I mean, that was my experience, even in the early days of Tourstar Digital was designed to be a separate entity focused on being able to attract the right talent, the right kind of thinking, and experimentation that, in an existing mothership organization would not be judged with the right metrics. So I definitely understand what you're saying. Now, what I'm interested in as well is, talk to us about what you've learned about teaching, about how do you actually teach organizations? What's the process you take organizations through? How do people actually learn these concepts best? What have you discovered, actually works in getting people to learn and unlearn, a lot of what they need to unlearn?
So there's a couple of things to just point out here. One is that organizations will say they really want to learn, but behind the scenes, none of their processes or KPIs or operating procedures kind of match that. So I remember, I'll tell a quick story. I was 2 weeks into Yahoo. They've given me new office space away from the mothership. I have 30 of the best developers in the world in my group because they all want to work on this cool stuff at the edge. And a furniture truck rolls up, doorbell rings, and the guy goes, "I'm here to deliver the furniture. My job is to furnish the office." And we opened the back of the truck because we hadn't ordered any furniture, and it's full of yellow and purple couches and cubicles, and it's basically Dilbert hell, right? And my entire team goes, "If that comes in, we're out of here. We want like beanbags and foosball tables and ping pong tables. This is not. We're not. We left for this." So I spend the afternoon on the phone with his boss and his boss's boss and my boss and my boss. And you know the drill. Everybody's been through this. We finish that process. Finally, I get rid of him. It takes half a day. 2 weeks later, doorbell rings. Same truck, same furniture, same guy. And he's like, "My boss changed. Notice you didn't have the tick box. I'm ordered to deliver the furniture." And now you have to go through the same thing again. And what's important is he's not being a bad person. right? He's just following the KPIs and the incentives and the bonus structures and the methodology and the processes that the mothership. This is the skeletal framework of an organization. And the reason that my thesis on why Yahoo failed was Terry Semel, the CEO before Jerry Yang, accidentally implemented a classic matrix structure with products on the verticals and all the HR, legal, horizontals, IT, privacy, etc. In that structure, every time you try and do something, it takes time. And the structure disincents risk taking. The legal guy wants the same terms of service across all properties. He doesn't want one entity because his life becomes hell otherwise. And it's very easy for those horizontals to say no. And if you're in an industry where your core attributes have to be speed and risk, that's antithetical. That org structure is antithetical to the industry you're in. And as the metabolism of most industries accelerates, that means that the architecture of most big companies doesn't work for the future. And so they basically need to break it up. And you see Alphabet breaking up into smaller pieces for each one to be more nimble. The 100 years of corporate training has taught us that you need to be hyper efficient and shared services and back-end efficiencies, and none of it works in this new world. So what we did was, in after the book launched, Procter & Gamble came to me and said, look, the book is required reading across the company. And I said, look, we're about to go through a 3-year dance where it's going to take you about 3 years to figure out that you'll do the Silicon Valley trip, you'll set up an outpost over there, and then you'll have the immune system response, and then the CEO will change, and it'll go through the same cycle again. And I've been thinking about how we can think about this. And we piloted a 10-week process that we call an EXO sprint that aims to break that immune system problem. And it worked really well. In fact, I thought maybe we got lucky because P&G is pretty advanced. Maybe we caught them at the right time. Would it be a lasting change or a flash in the pan type of thing? So we did it a second time with the largest insurance company in Mexico, family-owned, backward regulated insurance, everything. And it worked even better. And so now we've done it 30 times with big companies around the world. And we found we can actually hack the immune system and hack culture at scale in the legacy environment. And that makes it work. And I can talk about the mechanics of that and why it works. If you want to.
I think that's so interesting. And that's kind of my question, which is, give me the 3 things you did that allowed those organizations. I know you could talk for hours, but...
No, it's a good. You can summarize it. The key is what we did with once we found it worked, we actually published a second book on the methodology, and we've open sourced it. Because my thesis is every single big company in the world has to go through this transformation with or without us. So might as well just open source it. That fits our MTP of transforming the world. What we do is we get the senior management together and we do a Singularity style 1-day workshop, which is very shock and awe. And that freaks them out, right? And then you leave them alone because they're kind of useless for what's coming anyway. And not for any reason, that just they've had 30 years of experience in that industry and they can't think outside the box, right? When we then do is 20 or 25 young leaders and future lieutenants of the business, typically from their next gen leadership development programs, they actually do the work. So it's more of a coaching model. And they'll break up into 2 streams. One stream is looking at what disruptive ideas at the edge can blow this open 10x. Nestle and Espresso type stuff. The second stream is looking at what do we do to increase the metabolism of the core organization. And they do 2 rounds of idea development, and they pitch ideas at the end. We've allocated typically $500,000 per idea with the CEO beforehand. And if the senior management likes the ideas, they fund them. And we found that actually breaks the immune system response, because when you freak out the incumbents, when the new ideas arrive, they don't attack them in the same way. That's one. Secondly, because the young people are championing these ideas and they're their ideas, they are relentless about pushing that through the organization. And the third is, it turns out to be a lasting change. So P&G has said they've gotten 9 figures worth of value of running that process. The Mexican insurance company has double revenues and triple profits in 3 years. And so we're finding real hard outcomes that are pretty profound and game-changing for the companies that run the process. Essentially, you're transforming the metabolism of the core organization.
What you say makes a ton of sense. And what I'm interested in is, let's talk about those young leaders. And young for me is a state of mind. It's not actually your age. It's a approach to the way you think about the world. So I just want to be clear. Otherwise, if it was about age, I'm over the hill now, but I'm still young in the way I think about things, is what I want to say.
Old people with a dose of psychedelics will get you there.
Totally. But what I'm curious about is what are those skills and beliefs that these young people have that make them successful? And I think that's an important part of this discussion of the future of learning, which is what do you need to believe and what do you need to be able to do in order to create this change that's required?
So there's probably two or three key things here. One is we pick people that have a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, right? And so that's
Mm-hmm.
one key heuristic of the people on these teams, because they have to be able to look at new ideas and quickly adapt them and think about how they're going to have a breakthrough product or service resulting from it. The second is just sheer enthusiasm and purpose driven. They have to have a lot of passion in them, and that's a second key heuristic, because that will then permeate that transformation into the rest of the company. And the third is the ability, the beliefs. You have to give them a belief that they can actually make a difference. Because what happens
Mm-hmm.
is, in any kind of innovation effort, you try and do something really exciting. The first time you're super buzzed about it, and the company just shuts the whole thing down. And then you try it again, and your enthusiasm maybe 30% of what it was. You do that 3 or 4 times, and people are like, this place will never change. Why bother? And you get this inert, and you've seen it. I see you nodding, right? You've seen this 100 times. Um, and you have to get them juiced up and jazzed up, and the senior management has to show them that they will actually make this happen and let this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why a decent number of people is, you need the critical mass of people. We've had, out of the 30 times we've done it, we've had one failure, which was a Middle Eastern effort where they do what we call innovation theater. They want to tick the box saying they did it, but they're not really interested in actually making any change. And the entire cadre of young leaders just left the company.
Right.
Because they realize they're not serious at all. So you lose your leadership, future leadership.
Right.
And then they're like, oh
Sure.
crap, we just lost our entire younger generation. And now they're running it again to show them that they're really serious about it. So in the end, it works out.
Yeah. Really great. So my next question for you is your learning community, and I call it that. I think about EXO
Yeah.
works as a type of school, a type of community school in many ways. I'm I'm really interested in the role of community. And you kind
Yeah.
of mentioned this in terms of how you design exponential orgs. You need leverage or scale. And I think you said you have 6,700 people in this community. Tell
Yeah,
us
that's right.
more about the importance of community in building learning experiences.
I think it's over the years since I wrote the book, I think it's become incredibly critical and mandatory and a necessary starting point for anything you build. So our methodology for building an EXO is first pick your massive transformative purpose. Maybe it's cure cancer. Okay. Number
Mm-hmm.
two is go create communities around that MTP, or join communities, meetups, existing groups that have that. Three, create your founding team. And number four, have your breakthrough idea. Like your breakthrough
Mm-hmm.
idea or color cutting is number four, because you have to have the first three. And if you look at the way TED uses community, and the reason we are so fixed on that is that the community with multiple eyes and ears out there just learns faster, right? And if you think of the most valuable colleagues and employees you have, they're the ones that learn the fastest. And so today that becomes a critical heuristic, and a group effort at learning is just much, much better than an individual on its own. So we're actually developing right now the second edition of the book, and we're doing it in a series of
Mm-hmm.
public webinars, opening it up, saying, okay, who's got examples for MTP, or who's got examples of people using algorithms in new ways? And that is going to result in a much, much better outcome than doing this. And I actually learned this when I first put the book together myself. We had a research team. We put the book together, and just as we were about to go to publication, I said to the publisher, "Look, I want to send it out to a few people and get some feedback." And he's like, "No, no, no, we're late. We've got to get to market. We've got to get to the publishing date." I said, so I sent it out to 100 people, and I said, "Look, if you give me feedback within 2 weeks, I promise I'll incorporate the feedback." And I figured 2 weeks, 100 people, I figured I get 7, 8, 9 responses. 40 people sent me detailed responses. So now I went through the hell of, I think I was drinking a bottle of wine a night. Because one person would say, I want more detail here, and the next person would say, I want less detail here. And it was just hell. I think, though, the book is 40% better for having gone through that exercise. And so there's the power, because now you have a group mind looking at it. You're going to get multiple perspectives, and those multiple perspectives are always going to nuance and improve my original thinking by 10x.
Absolutely. You just hit the nail on the head for something that we hold really dear to us at both Game Changer and Mastermind, which is learning is 10x better with a group, because
Right.
you are forced, to have a feedback loop, but also to get to have an experience where you actually, even just by listening to others, right, and
Right.
having the dialogue, things get better. And so I want to double down on that, which is the pandemic happened. We can't
Yeah.
get together. We're in a virtual learning world. Tell us about how you are navigating learning experiences virtually. Are they different from what you did in person? Are they better? Are there tools and tricks to bring the group together to have that community learning experience?
There are. I think the key is you need an MTP to start off with, a massive purpose, or whatever the purpose is, some context for the group to get together, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's curing cancer, or climate change, or fixing the potholes on our street, right? Whatever it is, have some context for bringing the group together. Once you bring the group together, the second is to create a container and a closed, bounded environment where they can feel free to be themselves. The third
Mm-hmm.
thing we found is really powerful is to have some music or some meditative type exercise to just get through and line people up with, so that all of their faculties are brought to bear. Then you get into some topic discussion, etc., and do some brainstorming, whatever you're doing in that particular session, and then you close the container, and then you
Mm-hmm.
set them off in their own way. And this is a very tried and true process from tribal rituals. Zulu tribes do this when they want to solve tribal conflicts, etc. Essentially, what we've learned how to do with companies is what a Tony Robbins or Landmark Education does with a person. They do achieve what you call a state change, a subconscious state change, and it's a permanent kind of quantum shift where somebody transforms literally in front of your eyes and they're not the same again. And we found we can do that now at a group and a corporate level, which we think is relatively new. More importantly, we found out how to do it in the public sector, which is way harder.
So fascinating. And I definitely want to dive very deep into that, because I know that's where you're spending a lot of your time, is now not just helping corporations transform, but actually helping the public sector transform. And, I'm just going to mention to our community, as always, we love your questions. We've got a couple excellent ones already coming up, but now's your time. Salim is amazing. He's got so much insight to share. So ask questions. Then let's kind of go a little bit deeper. So when I think about learning, obviously I wanted to know how corporations learn. I want to hear, what's the biggest difference helping public sector learn? What are you doing that you've had to change? What's unique about public sector learning versus corporate
Mm.
learning? And then I want to make sure we spend time to actually think about the future of education.
Right.
And we'll dive into that. So go ahead.
So public sector is harder in one way and easier in another. The harder part is that you've got policy changes involved, and you've got multiple stakeholders, and the politics of it get horrible. And so that's one issue. The benefit of it is everybody's kind of trying to do the right thing, and at the core of it, they're all aiming for the right direction, which isn't necessarily not the case in the corporate side. And so what we did was, once we cracked it and had done it several times in the private sector and knew that process worked, we said, let's attack the public sector, because now you have teachers fighting educational reform, and I'm finding that society as a whole is not progressing because we have this immune system response against them. And there's a gradation of immune system responses, right? Where you have corporate immune system responses, which are pretty bad. But then public sector, we have to fight existing policy much harder. The next level is academics, God help you if you try and update academics. They'll kill you very quickly. And then religion is probably the ultimate immune system, where they'll kill you if you step outside the bounds of what's acceptable in that religion or dogma. And so we kind of are going through this progression one by one on how to solve this at a group level. So we adapted the process. It takes 16 weeks. My first idea was and we don't do it through a nonprofit, because this has to be a nonprofit type of exercise. And my first thought was, let's go solve corruption in Mexico City. And my co-founders were like, look, Val, we know you go for it, but we'd prefer you not die on the first project, right? And one of my colleagues was the CEO of One Laptop Per Child, one of my co-founders, and said, listen, I know the mayor in Medellin in Colombia. So we did it 4 times in Medellin with public sector, the city innovation agency, and the private sector involved. And we've run it on education, financial inclusion, mobility, pollution. And then we worked 2 years ago with the mayor of Miami to transform public transportation in Miami. And last year with the Supreme Court in Colombia to transform the justice system in Colombia. So it takes 16 weeks because it's longer. Similar type of a process. You bring the stakeholders together, you freak them out. We have teams of entrepreneurs coming up with ideas. The stakeholders vote at different stages along the way. And so you're bringing them along in that thinking. And then you have your outcome at the end. And we found it works profoundly well. So we can take a public sector environment. The value proposition we come up with is, let's make a domain like public transportation or the justice system 10 times better than it has been, or cheaper, faster than it has been. And that's a very valuable, powerful outcome.
Wow. Very exciting. And, I think the public sector right now, I mean, we're seeing this. Obviously, we're living in the most historic week, of 2020 and maybe of our century this week. We'll find out.
Yeah. Yes,
so this stuff's really important. Tomorrow is going to be very important. I want to talk about, we've talked about learning, and I'm a big believer. Our purpose at Mastermind is a massive transformative purpose. It's really to democratize lifelong learning. And, we do that in 2 ways, right? We're about giving the tools and the templates and the ability for teachers to be able to have a direct experience with the learning community virtually, and about making the experience of learning highly engaging, immersive, and participatory, which is ultimately what we believe. But there's a difference to me between learning and education. And one of the things you and I have been talking about is, what is the future of education? And that's different than the future of learning. And you have very generously invited me to potentially join something you call a education quest. And I feel like getting on my horse as a knight and riding on this quest with you. Tell me what I'm signing up for. What does it mean to think about the future of education as one of your quests, which we're delighted to be a part of?
So I'll be very un-Canadian blunt here about this. So what we're doing is, now that we have a sprint to solve private sector and a sprint to solve public sector, the next one is an institutional sprint. How do we solve for the future of education or journalism or legal systems or healthcare systems, which all have their own internal immune system that are pretty tough. And so we're working on that right now. We've kind of designed it, and we want to pilot it probably on education. Now, when you think about the future of education, I distinguish education and learning in terms of push versus pull. Education, I think of as systemic. You get a bunch of kids into a classroom and you're trying to cram algebra into them, right? Mostly you're thinking about lunch. Whereas I think about learning as pulling down knowledge and understanding and wisdom and using it for the task at hand in near real time, in a sense. And bluntly, I don't know if there's a future for education. I think we move from education systems to learning systems ad hoc. And we should. The challenge is that you have to undo a lot of infrastructure, processes, policy, legacy thinking, market structures, which is not a trivial thing. But I don't believe there's a future for the traditional type of education. We created education as we know today as a job schooling methodology for the Industrial Revolution. And what we did was we took human beings, we turned them into robots. Your job description, follow those KPIs, follow those procedures, etc. And this next wave of humanity is really about undoing that and making people more human, right? The most valuable coworkers are the most creative, the most humorous, the ones that are most adaptable, and as I said, the ones that learn the fastest. So I think we need to dismantle education. And I'll give you an easy starting point. We noticed at Singularity University that if you're doing a master's degree in biotech or advanced robotics or neuroscience today, literally today, by the time you finished your master's degree, you're out of date because the field is moving faster than our ability to teach it. So now, why we see this when I advise people on hiring a data scientist. I'm like, there's a community called Kaggle of 500,000 data scientists. If you hire one, they'll be out of date in 6 months. Why would you do this, right? Just go access the community, learn how to work with them, etc. And you can be much more real time in how you interact with the cutting edge of a particular domain. So just there's a structural issue that can't be solved in any easy way.
Mm-hmm.
And you ask the simple question to anybody, how much of your university education did you actually use in the workplace? And the answer is pretty much zero. It's really the collaboration, team building, all the other stuff which you learn in a co-op program that makes you valuable, not in the actual sitting in class stuff. So this is the areas where I think it becomes harder and harder to justify the future of that institution the way it was. It desperately needs to transform from education to learning systems, which is why I'm so passionate, excited about the work and the type of work you're doing. It's just a question of how do you shift to that, and that's the work to be done.
Amazing, and I'm all signed up on my horse in my knight armor for this quest. So I can't wait. One of the areas that I think we both this is real for both of us, obviously in our work, but in our lives. You're a parent. I'm a parent. I have an 8-year-old and 10-year-old. I know you have a great 9-year-old young boy, and I know your wife is really passionate, as I am, in learning, not education, but ultimately learning. And so I'm curious, as a parent, what are some of the ways in which you are inspiring and enabling your son to be prepared for the future and to learn?
So, there are two driving factors that most of our generation grew up with, right? One is your parents saying, I was an engineer, so you're going to be an engineer. And you had this legacy that somehow I have to be a doctor because my parents were doctors, and you inherited that. And God help you if you stepped outside that, the immune system of the family would kick you out of the family if you didn't follow the family path. So that was one issue. The second, I think, is the idea that all of our education is supply side, meaning you pick up a skill and you try and sell that skill in the marketplace, and you hope you learn the right skill, whether it's engineering or accounting or legal lawyer stuff, and then you go to the marketplace and the job market and go, can somebody please hire me because I'm a good lawyer or a good doctor or a good journalist? And I think what's happening is that we're shifting from that legacy thinking, which, I'm me being an engineer because my dad was an engineer, is inherently tribal, right? And so we need to step out of that old paradigm. And the second part of it is that as we move to learning systems, we're moving to the demand side. So when I think about our son, we basically say to them, we don't say to them, hey, go learn how to be a good doctor or lawyer. We basically will be saying to them things like, what challenge do you want to take on? What problems do you want to solve? What gets you excited about the future? And then you keep their excitement going. The most powerful model I've seen in this whole thing is a system called democratic education, where they have classes going on in different categories, and a new child shows up at school. The first thing they say is, what do you want to do when you grow up? And they'll say, I want to be an astronaut. And the curriculum is formed based on the classes that child attends, or based on what they say they want to do when they grow up. 6 months later, if they say, I want to be a firefighter, great, now go learn more about chemistry and safety and team building and stuff like that. And so we're learning, I think, to be much more on the demand side than on the supply side. And I think the future of learning goes there.
You're my kindred spirit, right? And the reason I say that is I couldn't agree more. For me, it is all about passion-led learning, and so
Yeah.
much so that a few years ago, after I left Wattpad, I created something called Get Curious Now, which is a 6-week program for anybody, be it your 9-year-old son or my 65-year-old mother, to actually figure out something they're passionate about and learn how to manifest that into creativity,
Right.
which is ultimately, what you're talking about here, and is really profound in terms of a shift in the way people get excited. Because if you're excited about learning, it doesn't feel like learning. So
It's fun.
that's super. It's fun, and it should be.
Yeah.
Now we've got a long way to go before that becomes mainstream. I know you and your wife are putting together a phenomenal event. I think
Hmm.
it's in 2 weeks' time. And what I think is really interesting is that I think that it's called Surviving the School Year, but it
Yeah.
really is a learning experience for parents around how to help navigate this pandemic. Tell us more about what we can learn if we attend your event. And obviously, we really encourage the Game Changer community to attend.
Sure. So my wife Lily, she's the smart one in the family, created a summer camp on our driveway in our street for all the local kids, and it really activated the kids. And the parents came along saying, "You literally saved our life," etc. We've been doing online events called EXO World for helping businesses around the world survive the 2020, basically. Or the basic theme of it has been, how do we, as a global society, step away from Mad Max and step more towards Star Trek as a future that we're living into.
Mm-hmm.
And Lily basically said these events are great, but every parent needs help. And for your parent, you have strategies like babysitting and carpooling and play dates and date nights or whatever to deal with the cruft and the process and the intensity of parenting. Well, every one of those is blown out. Given COVID, and parents are like triaging nonstop and desperately, you're trying to do this, you're trying to get to work, and now your kid's home for a week because the school shut down. What the hell do you do? So Lily basically said these things are great, but you need to help the parents. So we put together, it's a 3-hour event on a Saturday, the 21st, from 11:30 to 3:30. The website is survivingtheschoolyear.org. It's through a nonprofit foundation called Moms of the World Foundation. Tickets are $7 or what you can pay. It's really making. We have Bob Oken, the former Assistant Secretary of Education in the U.S., Esther Wojcicki, who I know you know well, talking about. So there'll be a few topics like, how do you navigate the mental health issues and anxiety? What do you do about healthcare? What do you do about schooling if your school suddenly shuts down, etc.? And how do you navigate? So it's tactics and strategies for parents. And we have up to 100,000 parents that will show up at this event. So it should be a lot of fun.
Well, we can't wait to be your partner and share that with our community. And I think it's great because I think we're all needing to learn new things. This is absolutely the case. This is about lifelong learning. So we have some amazing questions from our community that I'm going to share with you. The first one is from Kate Babini, and Kate said, I'm so glad you brought up the public sector. My interest is in changing the public education system to become more responsive to the needs of society and the workforce. Why is it so difficult for the education system to progress? We essentially have the same system since the start of public schools. How or where do we start?
So a great question, and if we had an easy answer to that question, we'd be 10x happier, and our kids would be 10x happier. If you think of any of us growing up in school, it wasn't that exciting. It was pretty dull and boring, and you sat there twiddling your pencil while the teacher droned on it, and it was a push-based system. Went to a classroom, as I said, and they try and cram algebra into you because we were training factory robots for jobs, for specific job titles. Now, as we move to this new model where you succeed based on your creativity and your passion and your invention and your humanity, basically, we need to train kids in the same way, and that's a very different model. The challenge is getting a system or an institution to transform old to new is almost impossible. And what you have to do is create completely new models at the edge, and then let that become the new gravity center over time. Do not try and update the old. You will fail, or it'll take so long that you'll be dead by the time it happens. One of these teachers said to me, over time, the cream always rises to the top. And my answer was, yeah, the problem is it's sour when it gets there. And the world is moving so fast, we don't have the time. We need to make this change now. And I think of Corona as a massive gift. The global super tanker driven by fossil fuels and capitalism is kind of ground to a halt. And we can grab that wheel and wrench it and point it in a better direction. God help us all if we restart that super tanker in the same way that we were before. And I think the election of tomorrow is relevant, but we have to also we've been sitting. The world has been looking at the U.S. as a kind of a leader in many ways, whether it's capitalism or research and development. We have to kind of not do that going forward, because it's going to be a 20-year turnaround for the U.S. Just the fact that the current president was nominated shows you the system is fundamentally broken. And we think the future of humanity will be city-states as opposed to nation-states. And as we enter a future of energy abundance and water abundance and healthcare abundance and education abundance, then you don't need a lot of the old cruft. And the challenge is, how do we go from the old to the new? I think about this simple idea. We're entering a world of abundance. Well, every business model for 5,000 years is based on scarcity. For 5,000 years, if you didn't have scarcity, you didn't have a business, right? So this is a huge shift, and maybe the biggest we'll ever see in humanity.
Thank you for sharing that, because that was going to be my last question, which is, what does the shift from scarcity to abundance mean? And it is so profound, and I'm so glad you articulated that, because it's super important.
Do you want me to drill a bit more into that?
You know what? This is what we're going to do. I'm going to get through a couple questions from our community, because they're really good, and you're going to end on the note of how we need to make that shift more. Share your thoughts on that shift. So the next question, I think, is a great question, and we've touched on it, but I'd love for you to expand, which is from Christina Salimone. I hope I pronounced your last name right. So thanks, Christina. What are the most important things our kids should be learning for the future?
Yeah, the couple of areas that I think are very powerful are creativity, design thinking, problem solving. There's what are called the 21st century skills: collaboration, presentation skills, communication skills, etc. Those become the really powerful skills of the future that make you adaptable and resilient as a future, as a child, and not being feared of failure, constantly testing new things, not worrying if it doesn't work out, and not beating your kid up if something doesn't work out, etc. The tools that our parents had were very limited in terms of what they understood about the world. We have profoundly better understanding about neural retention and pedagogical techniques, etc. That also speaks to the difficulty of transformation. So I think of the young child, when we guide them, let them free flow and find their own passion, and let them follow that passion, and they will find the tools that they need. You watch any young child, and they've already figured out how to work things to solve that problem way more than if you had sat next to them and to figure it out. And that gives you a child. Basically, our job should be to get out of their way. And in fact, if I think about the work that we're doing with this immune system, is getting the old structures out of the way so that the new can come in.
Love that, and so aligned. Ruben Berga, thank you for your question. It's a great one. Excellent discussion, he says. Can you comment on holacracy? I think it's called holacracy.
Holacracy, yeah.
Holacracy, and how that fits with your thinking, i.e. a way of getting away from functional and matrix organizations and more towards decentralized governance. Talk to us about that.
So when you look about organization structures, you have a kind of a spectrum of classic corporate matrix structures to divisions that are semi-independent to small teams operating semi-autonomously like Google or Facebook tries to do. Then you have decentralized organizations, and at the end of it, DAOs. Decentralized autonomous organizations. Holacracy is a methodology for running a decentralized organization. We found that holacracy is a little too heavy as a methodology. It's one of these 80-20 things. If you implement 20% of it, you get 80% of the benefits. If implementing the whole thing spends you spending all of your time on the structure and not getting anything done. And so our recommendation is implement 10 to 15% of it to establish some basic loose structure, and then let yourselves learn and evolve new ideas around that. The biggest one is just autonomy for your teams and employees to self-select as to what they want to do. And our favorite example of this is GitHub in the US, or Steam, the Valve, the software engine, the software company. They have 400 employees. Each employee self-selects as to what they want to do. They have no leadership, middle management. They hire self-starters. They make more revenue per employee than Microsoft. So this is not a joke. They make an absolute fortune. GitHub just got sold for $7.5 billion, and I was talking to one of the accounting partners that where Microsoft bought them, and he said, "I'm freaking out because they've got no assets, no workforce, no intellectual property. What the hell do I put on the balance sheet?" Right? And poor CFO at Microsoft was like, "What the hell did you buy?" Right? And you don't have traditional metrics for this. So the quick answer is the direction is right. The tool set should be very lightly implemented in the terms of holacracy. At least that's what we found.
Absolutely. So, Salim, we're coming to the end. I want to give you a little bit more time to dive into this transformation from scarcity to abundance.
Okay.
What do we need to know about that? What needs to shift in our thinking? How do people really absorb that? I mean, we absolutely believe in that philosophy of game changer and mastermind, but how is that manifesting for you and the organizations you're working with?
So let me start at the technology side. We are coming to a point where we have abundant solar energy. We've been saying so solar energy, as an example, is doubling every 22 months in this price performance, and has been doing for 40 years. At this pace, we will be able to deliver all of our world energy needs with solar in 10 years. Right? So that means energy, which has been a scarce resource for the entire history of humanity, suddenly becomes abundant. One way of thinking about exponential organizations is they're finding business models around abundance. And a great starting point when we look at the music industry, you had 8 major music studios selling scarcity, selling you the cassette or the CD or the DVD and selling scarcity. Then we digitized music, and now all 8 are pretty much gone, and you have 2 platforms selling abundance, iTunes and Spotify, on a subscription model. So that's the transformation that we've seen in industry. That will happen in sector after sector, whether it's healthcare, transportation, energy, etc. The mindset though is really hard. All of our social structures, all of our biological structures are scarcity based and tribal. And we have to figure out how to transition that. And that's a very tall order for humanity as a whole, because we like it. And talking about the power of community, one of my key community members, Jerry Mikulski, threw out scarcity equals abundance minus trust. And you're like, holy crap, like that takes an hour to process that. And if you just think about that model where all of our institutions are based on mistrust, right? The government spends 90% of its time going, who are you? Do you have the building permit? Are you the right age? We're all our institutions, banks, et cetera, based on mistrust, right? And if we could trust people, we could then embrace abundance much more profoundly.
Well,
so how do we shift to those? And that's the work that we have to do as a global
love
species.
that. And I think it's such a good segue, because UBI, Universal Basic Income, is a business model of abundance, right? It's shifting from scarcity thinking to trust, right? And abundance plus trust. And what a great way to end this conversation, because we're very fortunate to have Rebecca Caden, who's actually a managing partner at Union Square Ventures, who works with a dear friend of mine and previous investor, Albert Wenger, who writes a lot about universal basic income in his thesis. And so what a great way to just tell everybody that we're very lucky. Rebecca is joining us on Friday at a bit of a strange time. It was the only time we could figure out to make work, but absolutely worth your while. Rebecca has helped build Union Square Ventures' thesis on education, which is really, really interesting. We'll be diving into that, and has made some really profound investments, one of them being OutSchool, which is also about passion-based learning in a way that is virtual and live learning, something we're really passionate about at Game Changer and Mastermind. And so with that, Salim, you have been amazing. You have been abundant in your generosity and your thinking and all of your learning frameworks. I certainly have gotten so much from this conversation. So thank you. This is just the start of our collaboration. We can't wait to do more with you and EXO and OpenExO. So thank you for joining us. And to our amazing community, all of you were phenomenal today. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for engaging. See you on Friday. And before I go, just a quick thanks to our amazing partners. As Salim mentions, this is about community, and we couldn't bring this without our phenomenal community. Either Live, you're an incredible production partner. Even my husband is involved. He's the executive producer. Thank you, Corey. And our awesome team at Game Changer and Mastermind, Maggie, Jerome, Samantha, and Chris, my partner in Mastermind. And we have really great partners who care deeply about where the future of learning is headed. This is Toronto Life Insider, York University, General Assembly, the Knowledge Society, Getting Smart, TechTO, Rotman, Canadian Innovation Exchange, and W North. Thank you. We are so excited to be learning about learning with you, and we can't wait to see you on Friday. Thanks, Salim.